The night is old, older than writing, older than cities, older than the first fields of grain bending under a settled farmer's hand. A small band of humans moves along the edge of a cold valley, where the wind comes down from the high ground, with a smell of stone, wet grass, and animal hide. Behind them, the day has vanished. Ahead of them, the dark is no longer empty. It presses against the firelight like a living thing. Beyond the circle of sparks, something cracks a branch. A child stiffens. An elder turns his head. No one speaks. In that silence, the human mind does what it has been shaped to do across hundreds of thousands of years. It searches for presence. It looks for intention. It asks, without words, whether something out there is merely the wind, or whether it is watching. This is where the story begins. Not in a temple, not beneath a carved idol, not in a scripture, but in a world where almost everything important is invisible until it is too late. Hunger is invisible until the stomach twists. Illness is invisible until the body burns. Death can arrive from an animal hidden in tall grass, from bad water, from a storm building beyond the ridge, from a wound that seemed small at first and then darkened. Early humans live surrounded by causes they cannot see directly, but whose effects are everywhere. The sky changes mood, rivers swell, children dream, the dead become still, animals vanish into rock shadow and return as meat, threat, or memory. In such a world, belief in spirits and gods does not appear suddenly as a strange invention. It grows from the meeting point between fear, wonder, grief, pattern, and survival. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. Because the question of why early humans began believing in spirits and gods is not simply a question about religion. It is a question about what kind of creature a human being is. It asks why a mind capable of making stone blades, tracking herds, remembering water holes, and reading footprints in mud also begins to sense that the world has hidden listeners, hidden powers, hidden wills. It asks why death is rarely accepted as mere silence, why storms seem angry, why caves feel inhabited, why dreams can feel more than dreams, and why, long before kings or priests or holy books, people begin behaving as though the visible world is only the outer skin of something deeper. The evidence remains incomplete, and it always will. No one can dig up a thought. Archaeologists cannot brush dust from a Paleolithic fear and place it in a museum case. What survives in the record suggests gestures, not certainties. A body placed carefully in the ground, red ochre scattered near bones, beads and tools left beside the dead, handprints pressed onto cave walls, animal forms painted far from daylight, strange figures that seem neither fully human nor fully beast. These traces do not speak plainly. Scholars still debate what many of them mean. Some may have been practical, some may have been social, some may have been aesthetic, but taken together, they reveal that early humans were not merely surviving their landscapes, they were interpreting them. And the landscapes themselves demanded interpretation. Imagine a world without artificial light, where night is not inconvenience but transformation. By day, a valley may be mapped by memory: the bend of the river, the stand of trees, the slope where ibex pass, the cliff where vultures gather. By night, those same places become uncertain, shapes loosen, distance collapses, a bush becomes a crouching animal, a moving shadow becomes a possible ancestor, enemy, or predator. Modern people often underestimate what darkness once meant because modern darkness is usually damaged by lamps, screens, roads, and cities. For early humans, darkness is complete, and in complete darkness the boundary between the known and the imagined thins. Yet fear alone cannot explain the beginning of spirits and gods. If belief were only terror, it would be too small to last. There is also awe. There is the sun returning after every night with a reliability no human could command. There is the moon changing shape as if wounded and restored. There are migrating animals arriving from beyond the known horizon, and birds crossing skies no human foot can follow. There is lightning splitting a tree. There is birth. Perhaps the most astonishing transformation of all: a living body emerging from another body, slick with blood and breath, helpless and miraculous. There is fire, captured and fed, both creature and tool, devourer and protector. The world is not only dangerous, it is animated by events so powerful that even a highly practical mind may feel that ordinary explanation is not enough. Early humans are practical observers. They have to be. A careless tracker dies. A careless gatherer poisons the group. A careless hunter wastes energy and risks injury. They know the habits of animals, the timing of fruits, the fracture lines in stone, the moods of weather. The idea that prehistoric people believed in spirits because they were foolish or incapable of reason is not supported by what archaeology reveals about them. Their tools, migrations, art, and survival across extreme climates show intelligence of a high order. The more interesting possibility is that spirit belief grows not from stupidity, but from a mind so alert to meaning that it sometimes finds agency where modern science would later find mechanism. Somewhere in the long human past, a person dreams of the dead, a mother sees a child who is gone, a hunter sees a companion killed seasons before, walking again in a place that feels real until waking breaks it. The dream is not like ordinary remembering. It has motion, sound, presence. The dead can appear active. They can speak, gesture, accuse, comfort, or simply stand at the edge of vision. For people without a modern theory of the brain, The dream may not seem like a private mental event. It may seem like travel, contact, visitation. The sleeping body lies still, but the dream self moves. The dead body lies still, but the dead person appears. From such experiences, it is not difficult to imagine a second self, a breath self, a shadow self, something that can leave the body and survive beyond it. No single explanation fully accounts for this. Spirits may begin in dreams, but also in grief. They may begin in fear of predators, but also in gratitude to hunted animals. They may begin in thunder, but also in the social need to remember the dead and bind the living. They may begin in altered states, sickness, rhythm, exhaustion, and the flicker of fire on cave walls. They may begin wherever humans meet something powerful that behaves as if it has intention, or refusing to be held in the hand. Long before the first god has a name, the world is already crowded. Not crowded in the way a city is crowded, with markets and roads and walls, but crowded with possible presences. The ridge may have a mood, the river may take offence, the bear may be more than meat, the dead may not be gone, the storm may not be empty weather, the unseen may be listening just beyond the firelight, and from that suspicion, repeated across generations, shaped by memory, fear, love, and survival. The invisible world begins to form. The crack beyond the firelight may be nothing, but the humans who assume it is nothing do not always live long enough to be proven right. A mind that mistakes a branch for a predator wastes a moment of fear. A mind that mistakes a predator for a branch may vanish from the story entirely. This imbalance matters. Across deep time, survival favours a nervous system that is quick to suspect presence, quick to read intention, quick to turn scattered signs into possible agents. The world of early humans is not a quiet puzzle waiting to be solved at leisure. It is a landscape where hidden causes move, stalk, flee, poison, infect, and surprise. To live inside it is to become a reader of traces. Footprints in damp soil are not just marks. They are a vanished animal made partly present again. A broken twig can become a direction, a scent can become a warning, a half-heard rustle can become a body imagined before it is seen. This ability is one of humanity's great inheritances from a much older animal past the power to detect agency before certainty arrives. Early humans do not need a formal concept of mind to know that other beings want things. The lion wants flesh. The deer wants escape. The rival band wants territory, mates, stored food, or revenge. Children learn early that eyes matter. Posture matters. Silence matters. The living world is filled with intention, and much of that intention is hidden. From this kind of mind, spirit belief becomes more understandable. It is not that early humans invent invisible beings from nothing. They already live among visible beings whose thoughts cannot be seen directly. A person never sees another person's hunger, anger, or plan in the way one sees a stone. One infers it from signs. The same mental habit that reads a hunter's glance, a wolf's paws, or a stranger's hand near a weapon can extend outward. A sudden illness has signs. A storm has signs. A run of failed hunts has signs. A strange dream has signs. Once the mind is trained to search for agents behind events, the border between natural force and intentional force is not obvious. Modern researchers sometimes describe this as an overactive tendency to detect agency, but that phrase can make it sound like a flaw. In the ancient world, it is often a strength. A cautious mind survives. A suspicious mind protects children. A pattern-seeking mind remembers where danger came from before and prepares for its return. The problem is that the same strength can reach beyond what the evidence can prove. When lightning strikes the same ridge twice. When sickness takes 3 people from one shelter but spares another. When a hunter insults a dead animal and the next hunt fails. The human mind does not rest easily in randomness. It searches for a will behind the pattern. Scholars still debate how much of early religion comes from this tendency alone. It cannot explain everything. It does not explain why people sing, dance, paint, bury, fast, or make offerings. But it helps explain why the invisible could become personal. A flood is not merely water if it seems to punish. A drought is not merely weather if it seems to withhold. A cave is not merely stone if entering it produces fear, echo, visions, and silence unlike the outside world. The mind that evolved to survive among agents may begin to treat the wider landscape as if it too contains agents, some small and local, some vast and sky-wide. There is a lesser-known detail in this story that often escapes simple accounts of early belief. Human beings are not only good at detecting agency, they are also intensely social explainers. They do not merely ask what happened, they ask who caused it, who knew, who failed, who owes, who must repair the damage. In a small band, survival depends on tracking relationships as carefully as tracks in mud. Who shares meat? Who hides food? Who cares for children? Who breaks trust? Who remembers an insult? Human social life is already filled with invisible bonds and obligations. When this way of thinking expands beyond living people, the world can become morally charged. Misfortune may not be random, it may be a breach, a spirit may be offended, an ancestor may be neglected, a hunted animal may require respect. This does not mean early people believed exactly what later societies believed. The evidence remains incomplete, and the earliest mental worlds are beyond direct recovery. But what survives in the record suggests that humans carried symbolic and social thinking into places where other animals did not. They made objects that were not merely useful. They chose pigments. They transported shells across distances. They marked bodies and surfaces. They treated some places as different from others. These acts imply minds for which meaning could be stored, shared, and revisited. Once meaning can be shared, invisible beings become more than private impressions. They become part of group memory. A person alone may feel watched in the forest, but if the group accepts that a certain grove is watched, the feeling gains structure. Children learn it, elders repeat it, hunters alter their behavior near it. A place becomes charged by story. Over generations, the story may outlive the first fear that created it. The grove is no longer frightening because someone once heard a sound there. It is frightening because it is known to belong to something. This is one way spirits may have moved from momentary suspicion into tradition. The turning point is not a single revelation but a slow accumulation. A face glimpsed in rock, a storm after a taboo, a dream of the dead before a successful hunt, a child healed after a ritual gesture, a corpse that seems empty after breath leaves it, a shadow that follows the body but has no weight. Each experience adds a thread. None proves a spirit in the modern scientific sense, but early belief does not require proof in that sense. It grows in the space where repeated impressions. Emotional force and social memory reinforce one another. And always, beneath the belief, there is the ancient logic of survival. Better to notice too much than too little. Better to respect a possible presence than offend a real power. Better to imagine intention in the dark than ignore the one creature waiting there with eyes open. The human brain is not built first for abstract truth. It is built first to keep a body alive long enough to eat, mate, protect, remember, and teach out of that living brain, alert and anxious under the enormous sky. The first spirits may have emerged not as fantasy, but as the shadow cast by intelligence itself. When the fire burns low and the body finally surrenders to sleep, the ancient world does not end. It changes shape. The hunter who lies wrapped in hide beside the embers may suddenly be running again across a valley that is no longer there. The dead may return with their faces intact. A mother may hear the voice of a child whose bones have already been covered by earth. A man may see himself flying above trees, sinking into water without drowning, speaking to animals, touching people far beyond the sleeping camp. Then morning comes, the body has not moved, the ashes are pale, the others are waking, yet the memory remains with the force of experience. Dreams are among the most ordinary mysteries of human life, and for early humans they may have been among the most powerful. In waking life, people learn that bodies occupy one place at one time. In dreams, this rule collapses. A sleeper can travel while lying still, the dead can act while their bodies remain gone. The impossible can unfold with the emotional weight of truth. It is easy, from a modern scientific distance, to call this brain activity during sleep. But that explanation is a late arrival. For most of human existence, dreams probably demanded interpretation because they felt less like illusions than encounters. This is where the idea of a double self may have taken root. A person seems to have a visible body, but also something that can wander. Breath moves in and out, invisible but necessary. Shadow follows the body, shaped like the person but made of darkness. Reflection appears in water, another self trembling on the surface. In death, breath stops, warmth leaves. The face remains familiar and yet the person is no longer there. Something has departed, but no one can see where it went. No single explanation fully accounts for how early humans understood this departure, yet dreams, breath, shadow, and death together form a powerful cluster of clues. Death is not merely an event in small prehistoric groups. It is a rupture in the social world. A dead person may have been a parent, hunter, gatherer, maker of tools, keeper of roots, healer, rival, storyteller, or child. Their absence changes the practical life of the group, but also its emotional weather. Grief is not abstract. It occupies the body. It returns in waves. It attaches itself to places and objects. A scraping tool, a necklace, a sleeping place near the fire. A path walked many times can become charged with the missing person. The dead vanish, but traces of them remain everywhere. What survives in the record suggests that some early humans did not treat all dead bodies as refuse or danger. In several prehistoric contexts, bodies appear to have been placed with care. Some are arranged in particular positions. Some are associated with pigment, tools, ornaments, or animal remains. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate the meaning of many burials, especially the oldest and most fragmentary ones. A careful burial does not automatically prove belief in an afterlife. It may reflect affection, hygiene, fear of scavengers, social identity, or practical concerns. But when the dead are given attention beyond disposal, it becomes harder to imagine death as meaningless. There is something quietly astonishing about the first humans who pause over a corpse. Predators do not pause in this way. Weather does not pause. Decay begins its work quickly, yet people interrupt the ordinary return of flesh to earth. They dig, they carry, they place. They may colour the body with red ochre, a pigment that appears again and again in prehistoric symbolic life, sometimes connected by later interpreters to blood, vitality, or transformation. Though that meaning cannot be assumed in every case, they may leave objects that took time to make. In doing so, they treat the dead body as still socially important. A lesser-known detail is that even before clearly elaborate human burials, some evidence suggests ancient humans and their relatives sometimes engaged with the dead in ways that were not purely practical. The interpretation is difficult, Bones move, sediments shift, later disturbance can mislead, but the very debate shows how deeply the question matters. If Neanderthals or other archaic humans intentionally buried some of their dead, then the roots of death ritual may reach beyond our species alone. If they did not, then Homo sapiens may still have inherited a long emotional and cognitive preparation for such acts. Either way, the dead forced early minds to confront a problem no tool could solve. The corpse looks like the person and is not the person. This contradiction may be one of the oldest engines of spiritual thought. The face remains, but awareness is absent. Hands remain, but skill is gone. The chest remains, but breath has left. When a living person sleeps, they are still present but unreachable. When a dead person lies still, they resemble the sleeper too closely for comfort, yet they do not wake. It is not difficult to see how the idea of a departing essence could arise from this difference. Something animates the living body. Something leaves at death. The question becomes where it goes. Dreams offer an answer, or at least they seem to. The dead return there. They appear not as bones, but as persons. Sometimes they may seem younger, stronger, angry, hungry, protective, or confused. Across later cultures, dreams of the dead often become evidence that the dead continue in some form, and although we cannot simply project later beliefs onto the Paleolithic, the psychological force of such dreams is likely ancient. A grieving person who dreams of the dead does not experience a theory. They experience presence. The heart reacts before explanation begins. From this presence, obligations may grow. The dead may need food, warmth, memory, respect, or safe placement. The living may need forgiveness, guidance, or protection. A grave may become not only a place of disposal, but a boundary between worlds. To disturb it may feel dangerous. To neglect it may feel wrong. The first spirit may not have been a thunder god or a creator of the world. It may have been someone loved, feared, or remembered. Someone whose body was gone from ordinary life, but whose presence had not disappeared from the human mind. This does not reduce spirit belief to grief alone. The same early humans who dream of the dead also face storms, animals, illness, and altered states. But death gives the invisible a human face. It teaches that a person can be absent and present at once. It makes memory feel like visitation. It turns the private ache of loss into a shared problem for the group. What should be done with the body? What should be done with the belongings? What should be done when the dead return in sleep? Out of these questions, ritual may begin to gather around the dead like stones around a fire. And once people imagine that humans have a hidden part, the idea can spread. Animals may have such a part, rivers may have such a part, the sky may have such a part. A world of bodies becomes a world of presences. The visible surface of things is no longer the whole of them. Somewhere beyond the camp, beyond the grave, beyond the edge of waking, the unseen begins to feel populated. The animal steps from the trees before it becomes meat, before it becomes danger, before it becomes a painted shape on stone. For a moment it is simply there, alert and self-contained, its breath steaming in the cold air, its muscles already deciding whether to flee or charge. Early humans know animals with an intimacy most modern people have lost. They know the weight of a hoofprint after rain, the difference between a fresh track and an old one, the smell of a herd carried downwind, the places where wounded animals turn desperate. Their lives depend on reading animal bodies as if every movement contains a message. This closeness makes the animal world more than a background of resources. It is a society of other beings. Some are prey, some are predators, some are competitors, some are scavengers waiting for human failure. The hunt is never only a technical act. It is a meeting between minds, even when the minds are profoundly different. The deer notices, the horse startles, the bison remembers pressure from behind, the lion studies weakness, the bear seems almost human in its posture, appetite. An unpredictable temper? A hunter who survives does not treat animals as empty machines. He treats them as beings with habits, intentions, moods, and powers. From here, it is not difficult to see how animals could become spiritually charged. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how far back fully developed animal spirit beliefs can be traced. But prehistoric art suggests that animals occupied an extraordinary place in the human imagination. In many Ice Age caves, animals appear with a force and frequency that far exceeds ordinary decoration. Horses, bison, mammoths, lions, bears, rhinos, deer, and other creatures move across walls deep underground, often in places difficult to reach. Humans appear less often, and when they do, they may be simplified, masked, wounded, or blended with animal features. This imbalance is striking. The animal is not merely food, it is presence. Hunting cultures known from more recent anthropology often treat animals as persons of a different kind, beings that give themselves, withhold themselves, take offence, or require ritual respect. It would be careless to project any one recent culture directly onto the Paleolithic, but such comparisons show what is possible when people live by hunting and tracking for generations. In many such worlds, animals are not passive objects. They belong to a web of reciprocity. The hunter must act correctly. Bones may need treatment, blood may need attention, waste may offend, a careless laugh or insult may have consequences. No single explanation fully accounts for the prehistoric roots of these ideas. Yet the logic fits a world where survival depends on an ongoing relationship with animal life. There is also the strangeness of becoming animal. In a successful hunt, humans must think like the hunted. They imitate calls, movements, and patterns. They cover scent. They wear skins. They enter the animal's path in imagination before entering it with weapons. The boundary between human and animal becomes practical before it becomes spiritual. A tracker kneels over prints and reconstructs the invisible body that made them its speed, weight, injury, direction, fear. In that act, the mind temporarily inhabits another creature. It is a kind of disciplined transformation. This may help explain why some of the most haunting prehistoric images are neither fully human nor fully animal. Hybrid figures appear rarely but powerfully in Ice Age art and portable objects. Their meanings are debated, and some may be misread by modern eyes, but they suggest that early symbolic worlds could imagine crossings between forms. A person with animal traits may represent a masked dancer, a spirit, a mythic being, a hunter in disguise, a visionary experience, or something else entirely. The uncertainty is important. What survives in the record suggests not a simple worship of animals, but a complicated fascination with the border where human and animal meet. That border is not only symbolic, it is emotional. To kill large animals with Paleolithic weapons is dangerous, exhausting work. A wounded bison or mammoth can destroy the hunters who pursue it. A successful kill may bring relief, pride, gratitude, fear, and grief together. The animal's death feeds children and elders. Its hide warms bodies. Its bones become tools. Its sinews become bindings. Its fat becomes fuel. Nothing about this is casual. The death of one powerful being becomes the temporary survival of many human beings. In such a world, the idea that animals possess unseen force is not primitive confusion. It is an attempt to live morally and mentally inside dependence. A lesser-known detail is that some prehistoric sites preserve evidence of repeated attention to particular animal remains, or unusual accumulations of bones, though interpretation varies widely. Sometimes these are the result of natural processes, carnivore dens, hunting patterns, or butchery waste. Sometimes they may hint at ritual selection or special treatment. The difficulty lies in separating meaning from accident after tens of thousands of years. Yet even when the evidence refuses certainty, the pattern remains suggestive. Early humans were attentive to animals not only as calories, but as beings that structured movement, memory, season, danger, and imagination. The predator adds another layer. Prehistoric humans did not stand securely above the food chain. They shared landscapes with cave lions, hyenas, leopards, wolves, bears, crocodiles in warmer regions, and other animals capable of killing them. The eyes in the dark were not metaphorical. Children could disappear. A lone adult could be taken. Bones could be cracked by jaws stronger than any human tool. Predators may have seemed to cross boundaries that humans feared: night, caves, blood, carrion, sudden violence. To imagine such animals as spiritually powerful is not surprising. They already possessed powers humans lacked. And then there is the animal that vanishes. A herd appears one season and not the next. Reindeer move beyond the horizon. Fish fail to return upriver. Birds gather and depart as if obeying commands from a country no human has seen. Migration itself may have seemed like evidence that animals belonged partly to another realm. They emerged, disappeared, and emerged again according to rhythms beyond human control. Later, agricultural gods would rule fields and rain, but before fields, the returning herd may have carried the feeling of cosmic order. The animal world also teaches transformation through remains. Antlers fall and grow again. Snakes shed skin. Bears disappear into dens and return after winter. Birds emerge from eggs. Insects change form. To people watching closely, nature is filled with bodies that seem to die, sleep, split, or renew themselves. These observations do not automatically create spirit belief, but they provide a powerful vocabulary for it. If animals can vanish and return, if skin can be shed, if antlers can regrow like branches, perhaps life itself is less fixed than it appears. So the early human world is not divided neatly between nature and supernatural. That division belongs more to later categories than to the lived reality of deep prehistory. The bison is natural, but it may also be more than natural. The bear is flesh, but also presence. The cave lion is predator, but also sign, fear, and power. The hunted animal dies, yet may require respect because something about it exceeds the body. In the filet mind of the hunter, the spirit world may first take shape not as an escape from nature, but as nature seen too intensely to remain ordinary. Deep inside the cave, the world of ordinary daylight disappears one layer at a time. The entrance narrows behind the people who crawl inward with lamps of fat and flame. The air changes first. It becomes damp, mineral, close. Then sound changes. Footsteps return as echoes from impossible directions. A whisper seems to detach itself from the mouth and travel ahead. Shadows leap when the flame moves, and the walls no longer look still. A bulge of stone becomes the shoulder of a bison. A crack becomes the spine of a horse. The cave does not feel like a hollow place. It feels inhabited. This is one of the strangest facts of the Ice Age symbolic world. Some of the most powerful images humans have ever made were not placed where they could be easily seen in daily life. They were made in darkness, sometimes far from cave mouths, beyond tight passages, drops, chambers, and dangerous footing. The people who entered these spaces carried light with them, and light in such places is not neutral. It trembles. It makes painted animals appear and vanish. It turns stone surfaces into moving skin. The cave wall is not a flat canvas. It is a landscape of ridges, hollows, stains, and natural forms that artists often used with astonishing sensitivity. A painted flank may follow a swelling in the rock. A head may emerge from a natural projection. The image seems less placed on the wall than released from it. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate what these caves meant. They may have been places of teaching, initiation, storytelling, hunting magic, social memory, identity, trance, or ritual encounter. Some interpretations once treated the paintings as simple attempts to control animals through magic, as though drawing a bison were a way to capture a bison. That may explain part of the story in some places, but it is too narrow for the full range of evidence. The caves contain animals that were not always the most commonly eaten species. They contain signs whose meanings remain unknown. They contain handprints, dots, lines, engravings, and occasional strange human or hybrid figures. No single explanation fully accounts for the variety. Still, the cave itself matters. To enter it is to leave behind the open world of sky, weather, and daily movement. It is to descend into a space that may have seemed closer to the inside of the earth, or to the realm of animals, ancestors, and hidden powers. Modern visitors often describe painted caves as sacred feeling, even when they do not believe in the old spirits, and while modern feeling cannot prove ancient meaning, it hints at the sensory force of such places, in deep darkness. The human brain becomes hungry for pattern. Under flickering light, uncertainty becomes vivid, shapes breathe, stillness becomes charged. A person who already lives in a world of unseen presences might not experience the cave as empty rock. Altered states may have deepened this experience. People can enter unusual states of perception through drumming, dancing, fasting, pain, exhaustion, isolation, chanting, hyperventilation, psychoactive plants, fever, grief, or the simple sensory deprivation of darkness. Not all prehistoric ritual involved trance, and it would be reckless to explain every cave image as a hallucination. But it is equally difficult to ignore that human nervous systems are capable of producing visions. Geometric patterns, animal forms, floating sensations, encounters with beings, and feelings of leaving the body under certain conditions. What later societies often call spirit journeys may have biological roots, but biology does not make the experience feel less real to the person undergoing it. One lesser-known detail is that some simple geometric marks in prehistoric art resemble visual phenomena. People can see in altered states grids, dots, zigzags, nested curves, and radiating forms. This does not prove that the marks are trance records, because similar shapes can be made for many reasons. They may count, mark ownership, signal group identity, decorate, teach, or encode information now lost, but the overlap is suggestive. The human visual system has its own hidden patterns, and under stress or trance, those patterns can appear as if projected into the world. A person in darkness may see lights without lamps, movement without animals, forms without bodies. For a mind already open to spirits, such experiences could become encounters. Fire is central here. Fire is practical, but it is also uncanny. It eats, grows, dies, reproduces, breathes with wind, and transforms whatever it touches. It makes hard meat soft, cold bodies warm, nights survivable, and predators cautious. Around fire, stories lengthen, faces become masks of shadow. Children learn what the group fears and remembers. The same flame that protects the camp becomes, inside a cave, a tool for bringing hidden animals out of stone. It is possible that early ritual life grew around fire not because fire was merely useful, but because it was the first great transformer humans learned to keep alive. In the cave, the distinction between making and discovering may have blurred. A painter might approach a wall already carrying an animal in its shape. The hand does not invent the creature from nothing. It completes what the rock suggests. This matters because it reveals a way of seeing very different from modern assumptions about art as personal expression. The image may have been a collaboration between human perception, stone surface, firelight, memory, and belief. The animal is already there, half hidden. The human brings it forward. Such an act could feel less like decoration than revelation. Handprints add a more intimate layer. A hand pressed against stone and surrounded by blown pigment is one of the most direct traces of a person in deep time. The body itself becomes a stencil. The hand says presence, but also absence. Person is gone, yet the outline remains. Some caves contain many hands, including those of adolescents and possibly women as well as men, challenging older assumptions that cave art was only the work of male hunters. The evidence varies. And sexing handprints is uncertain, but the possibility widens the scene. These dark places may have involved whole communities in ways we are only beginning to understand. The cave may also have changed sound. Certain chambers amplify echoes, and some researchers have noticed possible associations between resonant spaces and images, though the interpretation remains debated. Imagine rhythm inside such a chamber clapping, stamping, stones struck together, voices rising and returning multiplied. Sound without visible source is itself a kind of invisible presence. In darkness, an echo can feel like an answer. A cave can seem to speak back. The experience would not require elaborate theology to become powerful. It would only require a body, a flame, a wall, and a mind prepared to meet something more than stone. These cave worlds do not give us a simple origin of gods. They give us something older and perhaps stranger, a setting in which perception itself becomes unstable. The known world is suspended, ordinary boundaries weaken, humans enter the earth, see animals emerge from rock, hear voices return from darkness, and perhaps feel their own minds cross into places the waking camp cannot contain. From such experiences, spirits are not abstract ideas, they are encountered as presences in the senses. In the body, in the wall, in the echo, in the trembling edge of flame. And when the people leave the cave, blinking toward daylight, they carry something back with them. Not just images, not just stories, but the memory of having stepped into a world where the invisible felt near enough to touch. The valley outside is the same valley, the animals still move across it, the dead are still dead, the weather still changes without permission. Yet after the cave, the surface of the world may seem thinner. Behind stone, shadow, animal, and dream, something waits. The body must be dealt with before belief can take shape around it. This is the blunt beginning of burial. A dead person cannot remain forever beside the living. Flesh changes, smell comes, scavengers notice. In warm climates, decay moves quickly, in cold ones, it waits but does not vanish. The living have to decide what to do with the one who no longer wakes, speaks, gathers, hunts, laughs, argues, or lifts a hand toward the fire. That decision may begin in necessity, but among humans, necessity rarely stays bare for long, it gathers meaning. Somewhere in prehistory, people begin placing the dead in the ground with care. Not always, not everywhere, and not in ways that are easy to interpret. Many bodies were surely left to weather, water, animals, or time in ways archaeology will never recover. Bone preservation is uneven, and the record favours unusual circumstances. The evidence remains incomplete, yet enough ancient burials survive to show that death sometimes received attention beyond disposal. Bodies appear flexed, extended, protected, covered, coloured, accompanied, or placed in particular locations. These acts do not automatically prove a belief in heaven, reincarnation, ghosts, or gods. They do show that the dead body could become an object of social concern. The oldest possible burials are difficult and debated. Some sites linked to Neanderthals have been interpreted as deliberate graves, while others may reflect natural sediment movement, carnivore activity, or later disturbance. Scholars still debate where caution should end and recognition should begin. This uncertainty matters because a burial is not just a hole with bones in it. To call something a burial is to infer intention, and intention is exactly what time erases most effectively. A skeleton in a pit might be a person carefully laid down, or a body trapped by natural processes. Archaeology often works at this edge, where the difference between ritual and accident depends on sediment, bone position, tool marks, pollen, and context. But by the later Paleolithic, the signs of symbolic treatment become harder to dismiss. Some dead are found with ornaments, beads, tools, animal parts, and red ochre. Ochre appears again and again in prehistoric life, not only in burials but in art, body marking, hide working, and other practices. Its colour, especially when red, invites modern association with blood and life. But we cannot assume a single meaning. It may have preserved hides, marked identities, beautified bodies, signalled status, or carried meanings that change from group to group. Still, when red pigment is placed with the dead, the image is difficult to forget the colour of living blood near a body from which life has gone. A surprising detail from prehistoric burial is that some graves involve children and infants given elaborate treatment. This complicates the older idea that grave goods simply reflect adult achievement. A child buried with beads, pendants, or pigment may not have earned status through hunting or leadership. Their treatment may reflect family grief, inherited identity, spiritual concern, or a social role we cannot reconstruct. What survives in the record suggests that early humans could invest enormous care in bodies that had lived only briefly. This is not a small thing. It means the dead mattered not only for what they had done, but perhaps for what they were, who they belonged to, or where they were thought to be going. Grave goods are among the most tempting forms of evidence, and among the most dangerous to overread. A tool beside a body might be equipment for another life, but it might also be a personal possession, a mark of identity, an offering, a farewell, a way to remove dangerous objects from circulation, or a gesture whose logic is lost. Ornaments may indicate status, beauty, belonging, memory, or ritual protection. Animal bones may be food, symbols, accidental inclusions, or remains of feasting. No single explanation fully accounts for the pattern, but the act of placing objects with the dead shows that the living were not simply abandoning matter. They were arranging a relationship. Burial also changes the landscape. A body placed in the ground makes a place different. The camp may move, the seasons may turn, but somewhere beneath the earth lies a person known to memory. If the group returns, the place is no longer only a shelter, valley, or ridge. It is where someone rests. Over time, such places could become anchors for identity. The dead tie the living to land. Even mobile hunter-gatherers can carry memories of burial places across wide territories. A grave may become a point in a mental map, a silent marker of belonging, before monuments, before tombs, before ancestor shrines. The earth itself holds the first archives. The treatment of the dead may also reveal fear. Love and fear are not opposites in early ritual. They often grow together. The dead may be mourned, but they may also be dangerous. A corpse resembles a person too closely, then not closely enough. It attracts animals, spreads disease in some circumstances, and unsettles the mind. If the dead can appear in dreams, if something has left the body but not vanished, then the living may need to protect themselves as much as honour the departed. Burial can be care, but it can also be containment. A grave closes a boundary. It says the dead belong here, and the living remain above. This boundary may have helped shape ideas of an afterlife, not necessarily a fully imagined realm, not at first, perhaps only a direction, an undergroundness, a beyondness, a continued presence near the body. The body is placed below, and the living stand above. The separation becomes visible. Later societies would build elaborate underworlds, heavens, ancestor lands, and cosmic maps. But the first step may have been simpler. Death moves someone elsewhere. And the living must manage the crossing. The grave is both an end and doorway. Burial rites also create shared emotion. A group that gathers around the dead feels its own continuity. The living see one another grieving. They remember obligations. They tell or enact what the dead meant. In this sense, ritual does not only serve the dead, it repairs the living. It gives grief a shape. Without ritual, loss is chaos. With ritual, loss becomes something the group can hold together. Early humans may not have needed formal doctrine for this. A repeated gesture, a pigment, a placement, a silence, a return to the grave could be enough. And once repeated, such gestures become tradition. A child watches adults prepare a body. Years later, that child repeats the act for someone else. The original reason may shift or multiply. What began as care becomes duty. What began as fear becomes reverence. What began as practical disposal becomes a statement about the human being as more than flesh. This is how belief can deepen without anyone inventing it all at once. It settles into action before it becomes explanation. The graves do not tell us exactly what early humans believed. They do something more haunting. They show that the dead were not always allowed to disappear into the ordinary processes of nature without human intervention. The living paused. They arranged. They gave colour, objects, position, and place. They acted as if death required response. And in that response, one can see the outline of a world where the person is not exhausted by the body, where absence still demands relationship, and where the earth beneath the feet begins to fill with memory. At the edge of the fire, some people learn to cross boundaries that others fear to approach. They may be healers, singers, dancers, dreamers, bone setters, poison knowers, weather watchers, storytellers, or the ones who remember which plant calms pain and which one opens the mind too violently. Much later, scholars would use the word shaman for certain ritual specialists who mediate between human communities and unseen powers. Though the term comes from a specific cultural history and must be used carefully, in deep prehistory, no one leaves behind a title. What survives are traces of unusual experience, unusual objects, unusual images, and the enduring human need for someone who can face the invisible without being destroyed by it. The idea of prehistoric shamans is both compelling and disputed. It offers an explanation for cave art, healing rites, animal-human hybrids, trance, masks, rhythmic music, and spirit journeys. But the evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how far this model can be stretched. It's too simple to imagine every painted cave as the work of shamans or every strange figure as a trance vision. Prehistoric societies were not all the same, and ritual life could have been shared among many people rather than controlled by specialists. Still, the possibility of ritual experts is hard to dismiss entirely, because human groups everywhere tend to recognize differences in spiritual, medical, and visionary ability. Some people faint, dream intensely, endure pain, remember complex songs, read omens, or handle fear in ways others do not. In a small band, such a person may become valuable because uncertainty is everywhere. A child burns with fever, a hunter returns with a deep wound, a storm destroys shelter, a run of hunts fails. Someone dreams repeatedly of a dead relative. A woman survives a dangerous birth and says she felt herself leave her body. None of these events fits neatly into practical knowledge alone, though practical knowledge is always present. The group needs herbs, pressure on wounds, warmth, rest, and skill, but it also needs explanation. It needs reassurance. It needs a way to act when ordinary action is exhausted. The ritual specialist stands in that gap between what can be done and what must still be endured. Healing may be one of the oldest roots of spiritual authority. Early humans knew injury intimately. Cut bone, broken teeth, infection, arthritis, healed fractures, and long-term disability all appear in ancient remains. Some individuals survive serious conditions that would have required care from others, showing that human compassion and social support are very old. A healer who could clean wounds, set limbs, identify plants, manage pain, and calm fear would seem powerful. If some recoveries followed ritual gestures, songs, smoke, touch, or altered states, the boundary between medicine and spirit would not be sharp. Even today, recovery is shaped not only by chemistry but by expectation, stress, social support, and the body's own hidden capacities. In prehistory, such effects could easily be understood as the movement of unseen forces. The ritual specialist may also have been a master of performance. This does not mean deception. A ceremony can be performed and sincerely believed at the same time. Rhythm, costume, darkness, firelight, body paint, masks, animal skins, and controlled movement can transform a familiar person into something more than ordinary. A person wearing antlers or a hide may not merely represent an animal spirit. For a time, they may become the place where that spirit appears. In societies without written scripture, knowledge lives in bodies. It is sung, danced, painted, scarred, remembered, and enacted. The specialist body becomes an instrument through which the invisible becomes visible. A lesser-known detail is that some prehistoric musical instruments, including flutes made from bird bone and mammoth ivory, appear very early in the Upper Paleolithic. Music is not a minor ornament to human life. It changes breathing, synchronizes groups, intensifies emotion, and can help produce altered states through repetition. A flute sounding inside a cave or a rhythm beaten near a fire would not be entertainment in the modern casual sense. It could organize fear, grief, memory, and expectation. Sound can fill darkness with presence. It can make a group feel as if one body is moving through many bodies at once. The shamanic model often emphasizes trance journeys. The specialist soul leaves the body, travels to other realms, negotiates with spirits, retrieves lost souls, guides the dead, or asks animal powers for success. Whether Paleolithic people imagined such journeys in exactly this way is unknowable, but experiences of leaving the body, meeting beings, descending underground, flying, or transforming into animals are common in altered states across cultures. The cave, with its darkness and animal images, seems almost built for such experiences, yet caution is necessary. Similar imagery can arise from myth, teaching, initiation, hunting identity, or social ceremony without requiring trance. No single explanation fully accounts for the evidence. What matters is that some people may have specialized in controlled instability. Most daily life depends on keeping perception steady. This track is fresh. This plant is safe. This stone will fracture correctly. Ritual life may require the opposite, entering uncertainty on purpose. The specialist goes where categories loosen, human and animal, living and dead, waking and dreaming, sickness and spirit, body and breath, surface and underworld begin to mingle, to the group. This can be dangerous and necessary. Someone must cross the boundary because the boundary is where misfortune often seems to begin. Such specialists could also become politically important, though in small-scale societies power is rarely simple. A healer who fails too often may lose trust. A visionary may be feared. A ritual expert may be mocked, challenged, or restrained. Early spiritual authority was probably unstable, negotiated, and deeply embedded in kinship and daily survival. It was not yet the priesthood of a temple state. There were no tax records, no royal decrees, no permanent sanctuaries of stone in the earliest phases. There was only reputation, memory, performance, and the ability to make others believe that contact with hidden powers had occurred. This contact may have helped groups survive psychologically. In disasters, people need more than food. They need a way to keep acting. Ritual can turn helplessness into sequence: gather, sing, paint, fast, bury, offer, wait. Even when it does not change the weather or heal the wound, it changes the human response to uncertainty. It tells the group that the world is not mute, that someone can speak across the gap, that misfortune can be addressed rather than merely suffered. From this comes one of religion's enduring powers, not certainty, but the feeling that uncertainty has a shape. The shaman at the edge is therefore not simply a magician of old stories. This figure represents a human solution to an ancient problem. The world contains forces too large, hidden, and unpredictable for ordinary control. Some individuals learn to approach those forces through dream, rhythm, pain, knowledge, and performance. They may heal, they may frighten, they may guide, they may fail, but in their presence, the invisible becomes social. It can be spoken to, negotiated with, blamed, thanked, or resisted. And as the fire burns lower, as drums or clapping fade, as the painted body becomes an ordinary body again, the group returns to the same cold valley, the same hunger, the same tracks at dawn. Yet something has shifted. The unseen has been given a human doorway. The spirits beyond the dark are no longer only suspected. Someone has claimed to meet them and come back. By the height of the last ice age, the human world has become both harsher and more richly imagined. Glaciers lock enormous volumes of water into ice. Sea levels fall. Coastlines stretch far beyond their modern shapes. Winds carry dust across open plains. Mammoths, reindeer, horses, bison, woolly rhinoceroses, cave lions, and bears move through landscapes that are not quite the world anyone alive today knows. In this cold, shifting theatre, humans do more than endure. They make meaning with a confidence that still feels astonishing. They carve, paint, engrave, sing, bury, ornament, and return again and again to certain places as though those places are not merely useful, but necessary. The great painted caves of Upper Paleolithic Europe are often treated as the cathedrals of the Ice Age, and the comparison is imperfect but revealing. They are not cathedrals in the later sense of organised priesthood, doctrine, and public worship. They are older, stranger, more intimate with stone and darkness. Yet they do create a sense of passage from ordinary life into a charged interior world. The animals on their walls seem to gather across generations. Some are painted over earlier images, some are hidden in side chambers, some are placed where rock formations already suggest bodies. The result is not a simple gallery, but a layered memory system whose meanings remain partly sealed. What survives in the record suggests symbolic worlds of great complexity. There are painted animals that appear with careful attention to movement and anatomy, and there are signs that resist interpretation: dots, lines, claviform shapes, branching marks, grids, and abstract symbols repeated across wide distances. Some researchers have proposed that certain marks may encode seasonal information, hunting knowledge, or reproductive cycles of animals, while others remain cautious. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate whether these signs are notation, ritual marks, clan symbols, mnemonic devices, or something else entirely. The important point is not that we can read them. It is that they were made to be recognized by people who could. Alongside the painted caves are portable objects, carved figurines, engraved bones, decorated tools, beads, pendants, and small sculptures carried through life rather than fixed in darkness. Among the most famous are female figurines from Ice Age Europe, often exaggerated in breasts, belly, hips, or pubic region. They have been called fertility figures, goddesses, self-representations, teaching objects, charms, ancestors, ideals, or symbols of survival in a world where reproduction was never guaranteed. No single explanation fully accounts for them, and the older habit of calling all of them mother goddesses says more about modern expectation than secure evidence. Still, their repeated attention to the body, generation, and form suggests that early spirituality may have been concerned not only with animals and death, but with the dangerous miracle of birth. A lesser-known detail is the sheer labour hidden inside small ornaments. Some beads took time to drill, shape, polish, and string. Some materials travelled far from their original sources, either through movement, exchange, or long social networks. A tiny shell, pierced and worn, may seem modest beside a painted cave wall, but it carries a powerful implication. People were marking bodies with signs that others could read. Identity had become visible. Belonging, status, memory, age, alliance, or ritual condition could be worn on skin. The spiritual world, if it existed for them, was not only in caves and graves, it moved with the body. This is where the idea of an Ice Age sacred landscape becomes important. Meaning was not confined to one kind of site. It may have stretched across migration routes, hunting grounds, river crossings, caves, burial places, stone sources, seasonal camps, and animal pathways. A valley could hold stories. A cliff could mark danger or power. A cave could be visited at certain times. A river bend could be remembered because someone died there. A herd returned there, or a strange event occurred there. The land itself became a map of memory. For people moving through vast territories, such memory was survival, but it could also become myth. The hybrid beings of Paleolithic art intensify the mystery. Some figures seem to combine human and animal traits, bodies with antlers, masks, muzzles, tails, or postures that blur categories. These images are rare compared with animals, but their rarity may make them more significant. They suggest that the human imagination was exploring transformation, not merely representation. A human might become animal in vision, costume, myth, or ritual performance. An animal might become person-like without becoming human. The boundary between species was not erased, but it was crossed in thought, in a world where hunters depended on animal life and feared animal power. Such crossings may have been among the deepest forms of sacred imagination. There is also evidence of repeated visitation and long memory in some decorated caves. Marks from different periods can accumulate, sometimes separated by centuries or more. This means people return to places already ancient to them. A young person entering such a cave may have seen images made by ancestors so distant they were no longer individually remembered. The cave itself became a keeper of time. To stand before old marks in darkness is to feel the presence of earlier hands. Even without writing, humans had created places where memory outlived the living voice. The sacred in this world may not have been a separate category. Modern language often divides art, religion, science, magic, and social identity into different boxes, but deep prehistory likely did not. A painted animal might teach young hunters, honour prey, mark group knowledge, summon memory, structure ritual, and express awe all at once. A figurine might be beautiful, protective, ancestral, erotic, instructional, and sacred without contradiction. A burial ornament might identify the dead and help them beyond death. The same object could carry practical, emotional, and spiritual force together. What is striking is that these symbolic systems appear during times of environmental pressure, not comfort. Ice Age people did not create meaning because life was easy. They created it while surviving cold, uncertainty, dangerous animals, and shifting resources. This does not mean hardship automatically produces religion, but hardship sharpens the need for shared memory, cooperation, explanation, and hope. When groups are small and landscapes immense, symbols help hold people together across distance and time. They make absent things, present animals not yet hunted, ancestors no longer living, powers not directly seen, routes not currently walked, seasons not yet arrived. The painted cave, the carved figurine, the ochred burial, the pierced shell, the bone flute, the hybrid creature, the handprint on stone, each is a fragment of a much larger world that has mostly vanished. We cannot reconstruct its myths in full. We cannot name its spirits. We cannot know whether its people imagined sky beings, animal masters, underworlds, ancestors, or powers without names, but we can see that they lived inside a reality deeper than immediate survival. They were building cathedrals without architecture, scriptures without writing, theologies without fixed doctrine. Their sacred world was carried in gesture, image, rhythm, memory, and place. And from these Ice Age cathedrals of meaning, the invisible world becomes more durable. It is no longer only a feeling in darkness, a dream of the dead, or a suspicion in the wind. It has walls, colours, objects, sounds, and roots. It can be revisited, it can be taught, it can be inherited. The spirits, if that is what they were, have begun to leave traces of their own, not because they carved the stone, but because humans did, under the pressure of believing that stone, animal, body, and shadow were never merely themselves. Then the world changes, not in a single night, but with a violence too slow for one lifetime and too vast for any one group to command. Ice retreats, rivers alter their courses, sea levels rise and swallow plains where people once walked, forests advance over open steppe, herds shift, scatter, or disappear. Animals that had defined human life for millennia begin to vanish from familiar routes. The cold world loosens its grip, but the release is not gentle. To the people living through the end of the Ice Age, climate change is not a graph or a theory. It is the failure of old knowledge. A band that once knew where reindeer crossed may find the herd gone. A coastline where shellfish were gathered may sink beneath the sea. A valley once open to grazing animals may grow thick with trees, changing the hunt entirely. Seasonal signs become unreliable. The sky warms, then snaps cold again in sudden reversals. The Younger Dryas, a major cooling event near the end of the Pleistocene, reminds us that the transition into the warmer Holocene was not a smooth ascent. The evidence remains incomplete in local detail, and scholars still debate how different communities experience these changes. But the broad pattern is clear: early humans lived through ecological upheaval on a scale that could make inherited certainty tremble. This matters of belief because spirits and gods often become most urgent where control fails. A stable world can be respected. An unstable world must be negotiated with. When animals vanish, when weather breaks expectation, when hunger follows a pattern no elder can explain, the invisible becomes more than a background suspicion. It becomes a possible source of crisis. Someone has offended a power. The old rites have failed. The animals have withdrawn. The dead are restless. The sky is withholding. Such explanations are not irrational in the shallow sense. They arise from a social mind trying to preserve order when the environment no longer behaves according to memory. The extinction of many large Ice Age animals adds a darker layer. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and other megafauna vanish from many regions at the end of the Pleistocene, with causes that remain debated in detail. Climate change, habitat transformation, human hunting pressure, and ecological chain reactions likely interacted differently across continents. No single explanation fully accounts for every extinction. But for humans who had lived alongside these animals, their disappearance would not have looked like an abstract ecological process. It would have looked like absence. The great bodies no longer appeared. The tracks ended. The stories lost their living subjects. Imagine a people whose grandparents saw mammoths on the horizon, whose children know them only through bone, memory, and perhaps image. The animal becomes myth not because it was never real, but because it was. Extinction is one of the engines of the sacred. It turns the living into the remembered into the legendary, and the legendary into something larger than ordinary life. A vanished species can become an ancestor of the landscape, a being from the first times, a power that withdrew from the world. What survives in the record cannot tell us exactly how people mourned extinct animals, but human memory is rarely indifferent to disappearance. Rising seas may have produced another kind of spiritual pressure. During the last glacial maximum, sea levels were much lower than today, exposing coastal plains, land bridges, and rich habitats now drowned. As ice melted, water returned to the oceans and moved inland over generations. For people living near coasts, the world's edge did not stay still. Camps, paths, burial places, hunting grounds, and story landscapes may have been taken by the sea. A place where ancestors once lived could become water. A hill could become an island. A valley could become a bay. Later flood myths cannot be simply traced to one event, and many popular claims about a single global flood are unsupported, but memories of local inundations may have deep roots in human experience. The emotional effect of such transformations is hard to measure archaeologically. Stone tools do not record bewilderment. Shell middens do not preserve the moment someone returns to a shore and finds it changed. But landscapes are not scenery to hunter-gatherers, they are knowledge systems. Every bend, ridge, spring, grove, and crossing can hold practical and remembered meaning. When climate alters the land, it disrupts not only food supply but memory itself. A spiritual response may be one way of repairing that rupture, by giving change a story. There is a lesser-known contradiction in the end of the Ice Age. The warming world creates new opportunities as well as losses. Forests spread with new plants, animals, nuts, fruits, and waters. Lakes fill. Fish and waterfowl become important in some regions. People adapt with remarkable flexibility, inventing new tools, new settlement patterns, and new ways of harvesting seasonal abundance. Yet opportunity does not erase grief. A society can gain new resources and still feel that an older world has ended. Spiritual beliefs may have helped communities carry continuity through transformation. linking new landscapes to old powers, new animals to old rituals, new dangers to familiar forms of respect. This is also the period when some groups begin moving toward more settled patterns in resource-rich environments, not farming yet in many places, but returning often to the same rivers, lakes, coasts, and seasonal gathering points. With repeated return comes deeper attachment. The dead may be buried near places of abundance. Ritual may attach to local features. Spirits may become more place-bound. A mobile world of animal powers and journeying souls begins, in some regions, to thicken into territories of memory. The sacred is not only in the moving herd now, it may be in the spring that never dries, the grove that feeds the group, the shore where ancestors lie beneath rising sand. Climate chaos may also have intensified the role of ritual specialists. When old knowledge fails, people look harder toward those who claim access to hidden causes. A healer, dreamer, or visionary may be asked why the animals have gone, why children are sick, why the cold has returned, why the river has changed. The answer may not be accurate by modern scientific standards, but it can still organise action. Rituals can coordinate group behaviour, reduce panic, justify migration, renew commitment, or mark the abandonment of a place. Belief does not need to control climate to shape survival. The end of the Ice Age, therefore, does not simply push humans toward gods through fear. It creates a vast theatre of instability in which older forms of meaning must adapt. Animal spirits may become memories of vanished herds. Ancestors may become guardians of places now threatened or lost. Storms, floods, droughts, and strange seasons may become signs of powers whose moods must be read. The invisible world becomes a way to think about change when change exceeds human scale. And as the ice melts back, it leaves behind more than lakes and valleys. It leaves a human mind trained by catastrophe to search for deeper order. The world has proven that it can transform beyond recognition. The ground beneath memory can vanish. The animals can leave, the sea can climb, the sky can betray expectation. In such a world, belief in spirits and God is not an escape from reality. It is one of the ways early humans try to survive reality when reality becomes too large to bear in silence. As the climate settles into the warmer rhythms of the Holocene, some human groups begin to return to the same places with a new kind of regularity. They still hunt, they still gather, they still move when seasons demand it, but in certain rich landscapes beside rivers, lakes, wetlands, and coasts, staying becomes more possible than it once was. Food can be stored, fish return, nuts can be harvested in quantity, wild grains can be gathered, processed, and protected. The camp becomes a place remembered not only as a stop along a route, but as a centre of repeated life, and once people begin living longer in one place, the dead begin to remain near the living in a different way. A grave in a mobile world may be visited rarely. A grave beneath or near a settled dwelling is harder to forget. In some early village societies, the dead are placed close to houses, under floors, within abandoned structures, or in areas tied to domestic life. This does not happen everywhere, and it does not always mean the same thing. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how to interpret many early village burials, but the pattern is powerful. The dead are no longer only behind the group, left in older camps or remembered landscapes. They are underfoot. They become part of the architecture of daily life. This nearness may have transformed spirits into ancestors. A spirit can be vague, dangerous, wandering, or attached to place. An ancestor is more specific. An ancestor has a relationship with the living. They may protect descendants, claim land, demand remembrance, punish neglect, or link a household to a deeper past. When people live in houses built over older houses, when children grow up above the bones of earlier generations, memory gains weight. The house is not just shelter. It becomes a container of time. A surprising detail from some Neolithic communities is the treatment of skulls. In parts of the ancient Near East, human skulls were sometimes removed, curated, plastered, painted, or given facial features. These famous plastered skulls do not provide a simple window into belief, and their meanings remain debated. They may represent ancestors, defeated enemies, revered persons, household founders, ritual objects, or social claims. But they show that the human head could carry extraordinary significance after death. The face, the part of the body most tied to recognition, could be remade after decay. The dead were not merely buried and forgotten. Some were brought back into the world of the living in altered form. This practice reveals a major shift. Earlier burial often places the dead away, below, or apart. Ancestor practices can bring parts of the dead back into circulation. A skull kept, displayed, reburied, or handled becomes a bridge between absence and presence. It is not a living person, but it is not ordinary bone either. It is memory made material. In such acts, belief becomes domestic. The sacred is not only in caves, storms, herds, or distant ritual places. It is inside the house, near the hearth, beneath the sleeping area, in the very structure that shelters children. Settled life also creates new tensions. When people stay near one another longer, social relationships become denser. Stored food can be stolen. Fields or gathering territories can be claimed. Houses can be inherited. Conflicts may last because neighbours do not simply move away. In this world, ancestors can become powerful tools of belonging and authority. A family that can point to its dead beneath a house may be saying, in effect, that it belongs there. The dead become witnesses. They anchor claims that living people may dispute. What survives in the record suggests that ritual and social order were deeply intertwined from the beginning of settled life. This does not mean ancestor belief was cynical or invented only for property. That would be too modern and too narrow. The dead are emotionally real to the living, but emotional reality and social power often grow together. An ancestor can be loved, feared, remembered, and politically useful at the same time. No single explanation fully accounts for these practices. They may express grief, identity, inheritance, cosmology, fear of ghosts, household protection, and communal continuity all at once. Early religion rarely fits into one category because human life does not. The house itself may have become a ritual body. Floors are renewed, walls are replastered, hearths are maintained, old structures are filled in, burned, or rebuilt. In some early settlements, houses seem to accumulate histories of use and closure that suggest more than simple construction and abandonment. A dwelling can die, be buried, and be reborn. This rhythm echoes human life. The line between architecture and ancestor memory becomes thin. People live inside built environments that remember. At the same time, settlement changes the relationship with landscape spirits. A mobile hunter may encounter many powers across a wide territory. A village dweller must negotiate intensely with nearby land. The spring, field, hill, grove, and burial area become part of a local sacred geography. Spirits may become tied to boundaries, households, crops, water sources, and lineage. The invisible world becomes less open and wandering, more rooted. It still contains danger. But it also begins to resemble society elders, founders, guardians, claimants, insiders, outsiders. The rise of ancestors also changes time. Hunter-gatherer memory can be deep and precise, but settled life gives memory physical layers. One floor lies over another, one generation builds above another. A child may grow up hearing that the people below made the first house, cleared the first patch, found the spring, survived the famine, or came from another land. Whether such stories are historically exact is less important than their function. They turn time into descent. They make the living part of a chain. And in that chain, gods are not yet inevitable, but one path toward them opens. Ancestors can become more distant, less personal, more powerful. A remembered founder may become a culture hero. A culture hero may become a spirit of the village. A village spirit may merge with fertility, weather, or protection. Over generations, the dead can grow larger as individual memories fade. The person becomes an ancestor. The ancestor becomes a power. The power becomes part of a sacred order. The shift from spirits to ancestors is therefore not a replacement, but a thickening. The invisible world now has genealogy. It has addresses. It has obligations tied to houses, land, and descent. The dead beneath the floor are not gone into a vague beyond. They are close, perhaps too close, supporting and unsettling the lives above them. Every meal, every birth, every quarrel, every repair to the house happens over layers of remembered bodies. In the older night beyond the fire, humans sensed possible presences in the dark. In the early village, the presence is no longer only out there. It is below the packed earth of the floor, behind the plastered wall, inside the shape of the house itself. The spirits have entered the home. Once people begin planting, the invisible world changes again. The field is not like the hunt. A hunter follows animals that move with their own bodies and wills, but a farmer commits hope to a place and waits. Seeds disappear into darkness. For days, nothing proves that they are alive. Then a green blade breaks the surface, impossibly delicate and impossibly important. The harvest depends on timing, rain, soil, insects, heat, cold, disease, labour, storage, and luck. Farming gives humans more food in some places, but it also gives them new anxieties. It ties survival to cycles that can be watched, influenced, and feared, but never fully controlled. This is a crucial turn in the story of gods. Spirits of animals, caves, ancestors, and local places do not vanish. But farming encourages powers with wider authority, rainbringers, storm senders, earth mothers, grain spirits, sky watchers, fertility forces, and guardians of seasonal order. A failed hunt is terrible, but a failed harvest can threaten an entire village. The field makes dependence visible. People can weed, irrigate, sow, harvest, and store. Yet the final result still rests with forces beyond human command. No single explanation fully accounts for the rise of agricultural religion, but the link between farming and intensified concern with fertility, weather, and cosmic rhythm is hard to miss. The sky becomes a calendar and a judge. The sun's path lengthens and shortens. Stars rise at certain times of year. The moon changes in cycles that can be counted. Rains come too early, too late, too hard, or not at all. In many early farming regions, watching the heavens becomes practical knowledge, but practical knowledge can also become sacred knowledge. A person who knows when to plant may seem to understand the will of the sky. A ritual that begins before the rains may feel necessary not because it guarantees rain, but because it places the community in proper relationship with the forces that sustain it. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how to separate practical seasonal observation from religious meaning in early farming societies. A building aligned with the sun may be ritual, calendrical, political, domestic, or several things at once. A figurine found in a village may represent fertility, play, identity, protection, or something we cannot name. A storage pit may be purely practical, or it may also be treated as a womb of grain in return. Early agriculture did not create one religion, it created conditions in which life, death, soil, and sky became tightly braided. There is a lesser-known irony here. Farming did not always make life easier. In many regions, early farmers show signs of harder labour, narrower diets, disease from close settlement, and vulnerability to crop failure. Settled villages could support more people, but more people meant more mouths when harvest failed. Domestic animals brought meat, milk, traction, hides, and manure, but also new diseases and new forms of dependence. The agricultural revolution was not simply progress. It was a bargain, and bargains with uncertain powers tend to become religious. Seeds themselves carry the logic of resurrection. They are buried like the dead and return as life. Grain is cut, threshed, ground, baked, eaten, and replanted. The plant dies, so the community lives, and part of the harvest must be withheld from hunger to become next year's seed. This discipline can feel almost moral. Consume everything now, and the future dies. Save the seed, and invisible life waits underground. In such rhythms, death and renewal are not abstract ideas. They are handled in the hand, stored in baskets, watched in fields, and feared in drought. Fertility becomes a wide concern, not only for crops but for animals and humans. A village needs children, lambs, calves, sprouts, milk, fruit, and grain. Barrenness in any form is alarming. Too much rain rots the field, too little leaves dust, too many insects strip the stalks. A woman's pregnancy, a ewe's birth, and a field's germination may become linked in the imagination because all involve hidden growth. This does not mean every female figurine is a goddess or every round form is a fertility symbol. That older assumption has been rightly challenged, but it remains likely that reproductive power, because it was dangerous and necessary, became spiritually significant in many places. The dangerous sky also grows larger. Storms that once terrified mobile bands now threaten stored food, houses, fields, and irrigation works. Lightning can burn a roof. Hail can flatten crops in minutes. Floods can bring fertility through silt or destroy everything in a night. Drought can starve quietly. The sky becomes both giver and destroyer, and such double power is exactly what later gods often possess. They are not merely kind. They are not merely cruel. They are forces that must be honoured because life depends on their unstable generosity. Farming also reshapes time into expectation. The hunter reads immediate signs, the farmer lives months ahead. Planting is an act of trust in a future no one can see. Ritual fits this future-facing life. Ceremonies at sowing, first sprouting, harvest, storage, and seasonal turning points help communities move together through uncertainty. They mark when work begins, when food can be eaten, when seed must be saved, when animals should mate, when the dead should be remembered. Belief becomes a calendar written in action. As villages grow, these rituals may become communal obligations. A household can pray for rain, but a whole village needs the rains together. Shared rites can reduce conflict by aligning labour and hope. They can also create authority. Someone must know the proper songs, gestures, days, offerings, taboos, and stories. The ritual specialist of the foraging world does not disappear, but new forms of leadership begin to gather around stored grain, land, season, and ceremony. The sacred becomes tied to management. What survives in the record suggests that early agricultural communities often lived in a world where domestic space, burial, animal life, and cultivation overlapped. The sacred was not sealed away in distant temples at first. It was near ovens, storage bins, plastered floors, pens, courtyards, and fields. A household might honour ancestors beneath the floor while watching the sky for rain and protecting seed from rot. This is not yet the grand pantheon of later civilizations. But the ingredients are present fertility, death, order, offering, season, authority, and dependence. And through farming, the gods begin to grow in scale. A spirit of a grove may matter to one band, an ancestor may matter to one lineage, but rain matters to everyone beneath the clouds. The sun crosses every field. A river's flood shapes whole regions. When communities expand and connect, powers tied to sky, earth, and fertility can expand with them. The divine becomes less local, more encompassing. It begins to govern not only a place, but a pattern. Still, uncertainty remains at the root. The farmer kneels in soil with knowledge, skill, and hope, but not control. The seed is covered, the clouds gather or pass, the field either greens or fails. Beneath every agricultural god is this ancient vulnerability humans have learned to shape life, but not to command it completely. The field becomes a place where effort meets mystery, where labour meets waiting, where the buried seed teaches that the unseen is not empty. Something hidden may be dead, or it may be preparing to rise. Before there are cities, before kings stamp their authority into clay, before writing fixes offerings, debts, and divine names into signs, people are already raising places that seem too large for ordinary household life. Stone circles, carved pillars, earthworks, plazas, enclosures, platforms, and carefully arranged ritual spaces appear in different parts of the world at different times, each with its own local story. They are not all temples in the later sense, and it would be misleading to force them into one category, but they show something profound. Human beings were willing to gather labour, memory, and belief into architecture before the full machinery of civilization appeared. This is one of the great mysteries of early complex society. Did religion emerge after settled life became large and organised? Or did shared sacred projects help make large settled life possible in the first place? The answer may be both, depending on place and time. In parts of Southwest Asia, monumental ritual sites appear among communities that were not yet fully urban and not always fully agricultural in the later sense. Göbekli Tepe is the famous example, with its massive T-shaped pillars, carved animals, and circular enclosures built by people near the threshold between foraging and farming worlds. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate who used the site, how often, and for what exact purpose. But its existence overturned older assumptions that temples had to come only after villages. Farming surplus and political hierarchy were already firmly established. The carved animals at such sites do not feel like decoration in any casual sense. Snakes, foxes, boars, birds, scorpions, and other creatures appear on stone in ways that suggest a symbolic universe dense with danger and significance. The pillars themselves, some interpreted as stylized human forms, stand like presences gathered in a ring. Their meaning is still uncertain. They may represent ancestors, spirits, mythic beings, powerful persons, or categories modern language cannot capture. No single explanation fully accounts for the site. Yet the labour required to quarry, shape, move, raise, and maintain such stones tells us that belief could mobilise bodies at a scale beyond ordinary survival. This is the turning point where the invisible begins to organise crowds. A dream of the dead may move a family, a hunting ritual may move a band, a monument can move many groups, perhaps seasonally, perhaps through feasts, alliances, exchanges, marriages, initiations, and shared rites. The sacred becomes a meeting technology. It draws people together who might otherwise remain scattered. It gives them a reason to cooperate, a place to gather, a memory larger than one household. And perhaps a story that makes strangers less strange. Feasting may have been crucial. Large gatherings require food, and food given in public becomes more than nutrition. It becomes alliance, obligation, display, generosity, competition, and sacred participation. At some early ritual sites, evidence of animal bones and large-scale consumption suggests that gatherings may have included communal meals. The details vary and remain debated, but the principle is powerful. To eat together at a sacred place is to bind bodies through the same substance under the gaze of the same powers. The feast turns belief into social fact. There is a lesser-known practical tension behind monumental ritual. Building something enormous before modern machines requires coordination, trust, and motivation. People must leave other tasks undone. They must carry stone, dig earth, cut timber, prepare food, plan movement, settle disputes, and accept instruction. Why do it? Fear alone may not be enough. Coercion may exist in later states, but in early non-state societies, persuasion, prestige, obligation, and shared meaning likely mattered more. A sacred project can solve the problem by making labour feel necessary to the order of the world. The monument is not just built by society, it helps build society. This does not mean early monuments were peaceful places. Sacred gathering can intensify rivalry as well as unity. Groups may compete over access, status, ritual knowledge, or ancestral claims. Dangerous symbols may warn, exclude, or dramatise power. Some monuments may have been open to many, others restricted. Some rites may have involved initiation, ordeal, sacrifice, or secrecy. What survives in the record suggests public grandeur, but not always public understanding. A large stone in a communal space may be seen by all, while its deepest meaning belongs only to some. The shift from household ritual to monumental ritual changes the scale of gods and spirits. A spirit beneath a floor belongs to a lineage. A monument in a shared landscape can belong to a region. It can gather myths that cross kin boundaries. It can standardise symbols, or at least repeat them often enough for distant groups to recognise them. Once people travel to the same sacred place, they may begin to share calendars, stories, obligations, and identities. The divine grows wider because the community imagining it grows wider. At the same time, monuments create permanence. A song can be forgotten if no one sings it. A ritual gesture disappears unless repeated. But stone endures. Earthworks remain visible after the builders die. Children grow up in the presence of structures made by ancestors they never met. The monument teaches without speaking. It says that the past was powerful, that people before us gathered here, that the place matters. It gives the invisible world a durable body. This durability also changes memory into authority. If a group can point to a carved pillar, an enclosure, a mound, or a platform and say that the ancestors built it, or the spirits chose it, or the first people gathered there, then belief becomes anchored in visible proof. Not proof in the scientific senses, but proof of continuity. The structure itself becomes an argument. It is hard to dismiss a sacred story when the landscape contains a massive reminder that generations laboured under its power. Temples before cities also reveal that religion is not simply a reflection of political power. Sometimes it precedes or helps generate new forms of organisation. The need to gather for ritual may encourage food production, storage, craft specialisation, leadership roles, long-distance exchange, and more permanent settlement. This does not mean religion caused farming or cities by itself. Environmental opportunity, population pressure, technological innovation, and social competition all matter. but belief may have been one of the forces that made cooperation at larger scales emotionally possible. The gods at this stage may still be nameless to us, and perhaps not gods in the later sense at all. They may be animal powers, ancestors, cosmic beings, dangerous guardians, or mythic presences, yet they are becoming public. They have places where many people meet them, they have symbols carved in stone, they have rituals that require planning, they have feasts, boundaries, and perhaps specialists who know what must be done. The invisible world is no longer only encountered, it is administered, remembered and built. And so, long before the first city walls rise, humanity is already learning that shared belief can move stone. The same mind that once sensed a presence beyond the firelight now gathers hundreds of hands around pillars and enclosures. The spirits of the dark have not disappeared, they have grown architecture and they stand in the open under the sky, holding communities together through labour, fear, awe, and the promise that the world has an order deeper than hunger. When cities finally rise, the invisible world enters a new age. Mud brick walls gather thousands of people into places no small band could have imagined. Irrigation channels carry river water into fields. Granaries swell and empty. Craft workers shape metal, stone, cloth, and clay. Merchants move goods across long distances. Scribes press marks into tablets or paint signs onto surfaces, turning memory into record in this crowded world. Spirits and gods do not fade under the pressure of organisation. They become more organised themselves. The divine world begins to resemble the city, and the city begins to claim the divine as its foundation. A god in an early state is no longer only a presence in the storm or a memory beneath the floor. A god can have a house, servants, fields, herds, offerings, festivals, accounts, statues, titles, and enemies. The temple becomes an institution as well as a sacred place. It stores grain, employs labour, owns land, sponsors craft production, receives tribute, and redistributes goods. The evidence remains incomplete in many regions, and scholars still debate the balance between religious devotion, economic management, and political control in the earliest temples, but the broad transformation is clear. Belief has moved from the intimate scale of dream, cave, grave, and household into the machinery of public power. This does not mean that religion becomes false or merely political. That would flatten the ancient world into modern suspicion. For the people who build, serve, and fear these gods, divine presence may be entirely real. A statue is not necessarily a symbol in the weak sense. It can be treated as a living seat of power, washed, clothed, fed, carried, hidden, revealed, and addressed with ceremony. The god may be thought to inhabit the image during ritual, to receive offerings through it. To travel through the city in procession, the material object becomes a body for the unseen, just as a painted animal once emerged from a cave wall. But now the body is guarded by specialists and placed at the centre of civic life. Priesthoods grow in this environment because large gods require regular service. Someone must know the calendar, the hymns, the offerings, the purity rules, the myths, the measurements, the omens, the accounts, and the correct gestures. Ritual becomes specialised knowledge and can be inherited, trained, restricted, and recorded. The shaman at the edge of the fire may have crossed boundaries through trance and performance. The priest in the temple maintains boundaries through procedure. Both deal with uncertainty, but their worlds are different. One works in the fluid danger of small communities, the other works in the structured danger of a society that must make the river rise, the harvest return, the king remain legitimate, and the city survive. Kingship deepens the connection between gods and power. In some ancient societies, rulers are divine, in others, chosen by gods, in others, servants, sons, shepherds, or earthly representatives of divine order. The forms vary, and no single explanation fully accounts for divine kingship across regions. Yet the political advantage is obvious. A ruler backed by gods is not merely strong, he is necessary. Obedience becomes part of cosmic stability. Rebellion can be framed not only as treason, but as disorder against the sacred structure of the world. Law can be presented as more than human decision. It can descend from heaven, emerge from divine wisdom, or be guarded by supernatural punishment. A surprising detail is how administrative writing and sacred thought grow together. Some of the earliest writing systems are deeply tied to accounting grain, livestock, labour, offerings, rations, land, and temple goods. This may seem dry beside painted caves and burial rites, but it marks a profound shift. The gods now have ledgers, offerings can be counted, obligations can be recorded, festivals can be scheduled, a divine household can operate with bureaucratic memory. The invisible has entered paperwork, which may be the least romantic and most consequential transformation in the history of religion. Sacrifice also changes scale. Offerings existed long before cities, but urban temples and states can organise them with new regularity and hierarchy. Grain, beer, oil, animals, incense, textiles, precious objects, and sometimes human lives may be offered to divine powers depending on place and period. Human sacrifice is often exaggerated in popular imagination and must be handled carefully. It was not universal, and its meanings varied widely where it occurred. But sacrifice in general reveals a basic ancient logic: the gods sustain the world, and humans must sustain their relationship with the gods. Giving becomes cosmic maintenance. The city also creates new forms of fear. Crowds bring disease, irrigation can fail, armies can arrive, crops can be taxed away, inequality grows, labour can be commanded. In such worlds, gods may become protectors of justice, but also protectors of hierarchy. They may comfort the poor and justify the powerful. They may punish oathbreakers, bless kings, guard boundaries, demand purity, or explain disaster as divine anger. What survives in the record suggests that ancient people were not naive about this tension. They prayed for mercy, complained of suffering, feared judgment, and sought signs because power, divine or human, was never simple. Omens become especially important in state societies. The flight of birds, shapes in animal organs, dreams, eclipses, floods, births, deformities, and celestial events can be read as messages from gods. To modern eyes, omen reading may seem like superstition, but in the ancient city it served a serious function. It gave rulers and communities a way to interpret uncertainty before decisions. It created specialists who managed risk through signs. It turned the unpredictable world into a text, though one that could always be misread. Scholars still debate how much omen systems reflect sincere belief. Political theatre, accumulated observation, or all of these at once. Ancient systems rarely separate those categories neatly. As gods become rulers, they also become characters in stories that explain order itself. Myths tell how the world is made, how death enters, why rivers flood, why kings rule, why humans labour, why storms rage, why seasons return. These stories are not primitive science in a simple sense. They are social maps. They locate human life inside a cosmos filled with relationships, conflicts, births, betrayals, victories, and obligations. The divine world becomes a grand version of human society. With households, councils, battles, marriages, feasts, and rivalries, people imagine gods through human patterns, because human social life remains the deepest model of agency they know. Yet older layers persist beneath the state. The city god may stand above all, but households still honour ancestors. Farmers still watch the sky. Mothers still fear childbirth. Shepherds still care about animal spirits, luck, and pasture. Dreams still disturb sleepers. Local shrines, amulets, healing charms, household figurines, and burial rites continue beneath official religion. Organised religion does not erase the old invisible world. It absorbs, ranks, disciplines, and sometimes suppresses it. The great god in the temple is built from many older fears and hopes. The rise of divine power therefore carries a contradiction. Gods help make large societies imaginable by giving them shared order, but large societies also reshape gods into instruments of administration and rule. The invisible becomes majestic, but also regulated. It gains temples and loses some wildness. It gains names, myths, calendars, and offerings, but also accounts, offices, and political uses. Something that may have begun in the crack beyond the firelight now stands at the centre of a city, robed, guarded, and fed by a civilization. And still, the old question remains underneath every ceremony. What forces move behind the visible world? Who sends the flood, the illness, the victory, the famine, the child, the dream? The early city does not silence that question. It amplifies it through walls, statues, writing, law, and kings. The gods have become rulers because humans have become subjects of systems larger than themselves. In the shadow of the temple, the unseen is no longer only near, it is sovereign. By the time gods have temples, names, servants, calendars, and kings, it becomes tempting to look backward and search for one clean origin. Perhaps religion began because humans feared death. Perhaps it began because dreams seemed real. Perhaps it came from lightning, hunting, social control, altered states, ancestor worship, or the need to explain what science had not yet explained. Each answer catches something true, but each one fails when held alone. The origins of spirits and gods are not a single doorway. They are a landscape of paths, many of them crossing long before anyone builds a shrine. Fear is one path. Early humans lived close to danger, and danger sharpens the imagination. A rustle in the dark, a sudden illness, a child taken by fever, a storm that tears trees apart, a predator whose eyes appear beyond the fire, all of these make invisible agency feel plausible. But fear alone cannot explain why religion so often includes beauty, music, gratitude, moral obligation, ecstatic joy, healing, feasting, tenderness toward the dead, and awe before the world. Terror may open the door to spirits. It doesn't furnish the whole house. Grief is another path, perhaps one of the deepest. The dead remain in memory, dreams, objects, places, and bodies of the living. A person disappears and yet continues to shape behaviour. Burial, ancestor care, skull treatment, offerings, and household remembrance all suggest that death is not merely observed but answered. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate the meanings of specific graves and rites, but the emotional logic is unmistakable. Humans are creatures who cannot easily let the dead become nothing. Still, grief alone cannot explain sky gods, fertility rites, animal masters, cosmic battles, or temple economies. Explanation is a third path. Humans want to know why things happen, and in a world without modern meteorology, germ theory, geology, or astronomy, spirits can make hidden causes personal, Rain falls because a power sends it. Disease comes because something has entered, cursed or punished. The hunt fails because an animal spirit withholds itself. This is often described as primitive science, but that phrase is misleading. Early belief is not only an attempt to explain physical cause, it also explains relationship. It asks not only what happened, but what it means, who has been wronged, and how balance might be restored. Social order is another powerful explanation. Shared beliefs help groups cooperate, remember rules, punish selfishness, organize labor, and trust strangers. A spirit who sees hidden wrongdoing can reinforce morality. An ancestor who guards land can stabilize inheritance. A temple god can bind a city. In this view, religion is a social technology, and there is truth in that, but it is too cold if taken alone. People do not only believe because belief is useful. They believe because experiences feel real, because rituals move them, because the dead visit in dreams, because mountains and storms can overwhelm the senses, because the body knows awe before theory arrives. Altered states offer yet another route: fasting, rhythm, illness, grief, isolation, darkness, pain, and psychoactive substances can produce visions, voices, out-of-body sensations, encounters with beings, and transformations of self. Such experiences may have seeded ideas of spirit travel, possession, healing, and other worlds, but not every ritual is a trance, and not every god comes from hallucination. The human mind can generate extraordinary experiences, yet cultures decide how to interpret them. A vision becomes a spirit journey only when a community gives it that meaning. There is also the path of pattern and agency. Humans survive by detecting intention, by seeing agents behind signs. This tendency can extend from animals and people to storms, rivers, caves, disease, and luck. It explains why the world becomes populated with wills, but even this is only part of the story. A mind may detect agency in the dark, but a culture must remember it, name it, teach it, ritualize it, and pass it on. Spirits are not only mental errors, they are social inheritances. A lesser-known but important idea is that religion may not have begun as belief at all, at least not belief in the modern sense of private agreement with a proposition. It may have begun as practice. People buried, painted, danced, avoided, offered, touched, sang, marked, and gathered before they could have stated a doctrine. The body may have known what to do before the mind explained why. This matters because modern people often ask what early humans believed. But archaeology more often shows what they did. Belief may have grown around repeated action like moss around stone. No single explanation fully accounts for this, because religion sits at the meeting point of many human capacities. It uses imagination, memory, fear, love, social intelligence, pattern recognition, music, movement, storytelling, grief, and the need for order. It is born from the same mind that makes tools and myths, shelters and graves, maps and monsters. To reduce it to ignorance is to misunderstand early humans. To reduce it to pure revelation is to leave the archaeological record behind. The most grounded answer lies between humans began believing in spirits and gods because their minds, bodies, and communities were shaped to experience the world as meaningful, relational, dangerous, and alive with hidden cause. This also explains why similar themes appear in many places without requiring a single origin. Dreams happen everywhere. Death happens everywhere. Weather, hunger, birth, sickness, animals, and uncertainty happen everywhere. Human brains everywhere detect agency, remember faces, mourn the dead, and tell stories. Yet environments differ, and so do beliefs. A coastal people may imagine sea powers. A herding people may honour animal guardians. Farmers may turn toward rain and grain. City-states may raise gods who govern law and kingship. The sacred is universal in tendency but local in form. The competing explanations are therefore not enemies. They are layers. Fear gives urgency. Grief gives faces. Dreams give evidence. Agency gives personality. Ritual gives form. Society gives memory. Ecology gives content. Power gives institutions. Over time, these layers thicken until a spirit becomes an ancestor becomes a guardian becomes a god becomes the axis of a civilization. And behind all of it remains the ancient human situation, a fragile body inside a world too vast to master. The first believers were not fools staring at thunder. They were survivors listening carefully to a universe full of signs, trying to decide which signs mattered. Sometimes they were wrong, sometimes they were observant in ways modern life has almost forgotten. What they created was not one answer, but a way of living with questions that would not go away. The spirits that early humans sensed in darkness did not vanish when cities rose, when writing appeared, or when philosophers began asking harder questions about the nature of the divine. They changed shape. They were renamed, organized, challenged, absorbed, and transformed. But the older patterns remained beneath them. Humans still dream of the dead. They still feel watched in empty places. They still speak to absent loved ones. They still turn disaster into meaning, landscape into memory, and uncertainty into story. When the ancient roots of belief are not sealed in prehistory, they continue under the surface of modern life. What began as agency in the dark becomes, over thousands of years, a vast range of religious imagination ancestor rites, household spirits, storm gods, underworlds, creator beings, sacred mountains, river deities, saints, demons, angels, ghosts, protective charms, burial customs, holy days, and moral laws watched by unseen powers. These traditions differ enormously, and it would be wrong to flatten them into one simple origin. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how particular beliefs emerged in particular places. Yet the broad human pattern is recognizable. People continue to experience the world as more than a collection of objects. They live among meanings. Even in societies shaped by science, the old instincts remain. A person may know that thunder is electrical discharge and still feel the sky's violence in the bones. A mourner may understand death biologically and still sense the dead nearby in dreams, rooms, songs, or familiar roads. A rational mind may reject ghosts and still hesitate before entering a dark abandoned house. These reactions do not prove spirits exist, but they reveal how deeply human perception is tied to presence. The mind that once protected bodies from predators still searches for hidden watchers, hidden causes, hidden intention. This is the legacy of the first spirit worlds. They show that belief is not merely a failed explanation before science. It is also a way of binding grief, fear, awe, memory, morality, and community into forms that can be carried across generations. Early humans did not begin with temples. They began with breath, shadow, dream, animal, corpse, storm, cave, fire, and the unbearable fact that the world acted upon them from beyond their control, from those experiences. They built invisible companions for visible life. No single explanation fully accounts for why humans began believing in spirits and gods, because the question is as wide as humanity itself. Belief grew where the mind met mystery, where the dead remained emotionally present, where animals seemed powerful and knowing, where landscapes held memory, where rituals gave order to fear, where fields depended on rain, and where rulers learned to speak in the name of cosmic power. The sacred did not arrive all at once, it accumulated. And perhaps that is the most important clue. The first gods were not simply invented. They were assembled from the pressures of being human in a dangerous, beautiful, unstable world. They were made from attention, from loss, from pattern, from hunger, from wonder, from the need to believe that the universe was not silent when people called into it. The fire is lower now. The valley beyond it is no longer the same valley where the story began. And yet it is. The animals have changed. The ice has retreated. The graves have deepened. The caves have fallen silent. Villages have risen. Fields have spread. Temples have opened their gates, and cities have turned gods into rulers of stone, law, and sky. But beneath all of that, a small human group still sits at the edge of darkness, listening. They do not know that distant descendants will call them prehistoric. They do not know that scholars will one day argue over pigments, bones, skulls, pillars, and marks in caves. They do not know that their fears and gestures will become part of a question lasting tens of thousands of years. They only know that the world is alive with things they cannot fully see. The wind moves through grass, the dead return in dreams, a child wakes crying, sparks rise and vanish among the stars. The story of spirits and gods begins there, in that fragile space between knowledge and uncertainty. It begins when a mind asks whether absence is truly empty. It begins when grief refuses to release the dead. It begins when the animal is killed and still feels powerful. It begins when the storm passes and people wonder what anger has moved through the clouds. It begins when the cave wall seems to breathe in firelight. Across time, humans have answered these mysteries in countless ways. Some answers became rituals, some became myths, some became temples, some became laws, some faded without leaving a name. What remains is the trace of a species that could never live by food and shelter alone. Humans needed meaning as surely as they needed warmth. They needed to place themselves inside a world too vast for the hand to measure. So the final image is not of a god carved in stone, but of a hand pressed against a wall in darkness. The person who made it is gone, their language is gone, their stories are gone, but the outline remains, a human shape at the edge of the invisible and saying without words that someone was here, someone saw, someone wondered, and someone reached out toward whatever waited beyond the light.